Hello, readers. This is Justin's 52 Books, where I discuss my selections for the 52 Book Club's 2023 Reading Challenge. And this year I'm only reading science fiction and adjacent genres written by women. I really want to explore the legacy of women writing science fiction fantasy with my reading challenge. And I really hit on the fantasy side on this week because it's week 12 and I'm talking about prompt 12, high fantasy. My selection for this prompt was Night's Wyrd. Night's Wyrd. I'm going to say weird because I don't exactly know how to say that, even though it's talked about in the introduction of the book. By Debra Doyle and James Macdonald, written in or published in 1992. So let's start out with some thoughts about the prompt because this has come up a lot on the Facebook page. High fantasy is a story involving magic that takes place in a world or setting that is not Earth, typically pre-industrial. Think Lord of the Rings. Low fantasy, on the other hand, is a story involving magic that takes place on a world that is Earth, Harry Potter. A portal fantasy is a story that takes place with some sort of doorway between low fantasy and high. Narnia or the Dark Tower books are perfect examples of this. Like I said, I'm pretty active on the 52 Book Club Facebook page, and I'll be honest, it's been a source of frustration to watch some of you people argue about the concept of high fantasy versus low fantasy, and some of the non-fantasy people being really, really off-put by these definitions. Like a simple Google search will get you what you need to know regarding these, and there's still people out there who are not quite getting it right, and I think it's sometimes on purpose. And I get it, you're not a fantasy reader. But what's the point of doing a reading challenge if you're going to bend the rules to the point where they're irrelevant? Do what you want, people, but we both know that Harry Potter isn't high fantasy. That being said, on to the book. Night's Wyrd is about a young knight who, on the eve of knighthood, is told a prophecy that he will meet his death before he gets a title, like Duke or Baron or whatever. He takes that to mean that he's doomed and takes that foreknowledge with him and goes out into the land, engaging in contests, fighting ogres, and searching for damsels. Don't worry, they save themselves. Being betrayed by a highborn and ultimately questing against an immortal ogre. If that's a quick description, well, is the quick book, and all those actions kind of meld into each other, which I think is kind of the goal of the book, to kind of mimic the Arthurian tales of adventure where thing happens after thing after thing after thing after thing. There's not much getting to know you time, and you get the sense that that's on purpose. Some things I liked the final quest portion of the book. I felt like it was the first point where I could actually take a breath and figure out what was where I was in the story. You have this immortal ogre, and in essence, you have a bunch of side quests involving mermaids and a dragon and a wizened old wizard. Up until then, the book galloped way too fast for me, and even at that point, the book is still going at a fast canter. But I didn't realize going in that the book was considered young adult, YA. And I don't really know if it was published with that in mind, because it was published in 1992, before that term really meant what it means today. But it certainly has YA feels, and I struggle with that. That's just me as a reader. There's no breathing room for story or anything other than plot in YA books, and that's good to a degree, but there's a rich world in Night's Wyrd that just got flattened out with a rolling pin of linear narrative. Was it good? Yes. Was it for me? No. So why did I read it? Well, I'm making my way through the TOR Essentials Backlist line, and Night's Wyrd is scheduled to become part of that backlist line here, or republished as part of that backlist line here in August 2023. The TOR Essentials are reprintings of books that came out in the 80s and 90s mostly, a couple in the 2000s, and maybe didn't make the splash that they deserved at the time and need a little bit of republication and love. There are some books like Fire Upon the Deep and Blindsight, which are now known for the classics that they are, but haven't been reprinted for a while. There's books like Robert Wilson's Spin or Terry Windling's Woodwife that won big awards when they were published, but need a little bit of love and a little bit of refresher. And there's books of real quality that got overshadowed when they came out for one reason or another. The Kim Stanley Robinson's and the Three Californias came out at the same time as Neuromancer, or Up Against It by Laura Mixon came out at the same time as the first Expanse book. And they kind of touched on the same thing, so, kind of lost a little bit of clout that they maybe deserved. Another example was China Mountain Jang by Maureen McHugh. I don't know what that was overshadowed by other than having a gay protagonist. But regardless, there are 27 works that have been put out or that will be put out. Some of them contain multiple books, so there are actually more books in the series than just that, but 27 collected books. I've read, with Night's Wyrd, that's my 13th, and I'm trying to get them as they come out. Night's Wyrd's inclusion is, I think, TOR's trying to edge up to YA before YA was cool, kind of an idea. Which, whether the book was right for me or not, it definitely does. Glad to have the TOR Essentials, even for the books that might not necessarily be to my taste. So I'm glad to have read it, but I probably wouldn't recommend it to someone who had the same taste in books that I do, if that makes sense. Other books for the high fantasy prompt. Well, I got a bunch of them because I've got a lot of opinions about that. First off, Discworld. Everyone should read Discworld. I love Discworld. There's a Discworld book for you somewhere, no matter who you are. Another book I would recommend that's high fantasy would be The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. She's kind of known more for her space opera, but The Curse of Chalion is quality and very good, kind of adult fantasy. Not adult in the let's not give it to children, but an adult in children might not be interested in this book. Moving forward, the Broken Earth books, definitely high fantasy, except for the fact that they might be science fiction too. Either way, go ahead. They're hella good, and you'll be glad you did. Kelly Barnhill plays in high fantasy waters quite a bit, and those books are wonderful. Not retellings, but kind of re-examinations of the tropes of high fantasy in different terms that are really valuable, particularly right now. If you were in the mood for something a little more literary, Culpa Imperial, The Greatest Empire That Never Was by Angelica Gorodischer, translated by Ursula Le Guin. Really interesting short stories just about city life and national life, and about being in a place, essentially. For fans of Jorge Luis Borges or Ursula Le Guin, very literary, very good. And then last but not least, another TOR Essential that I read because it was a TOR Essential and really liked, The Black Company by Glenn Cook. This book kind of has a grim, dark, ultra violent, and all the characters are horrible people, has that reputation. And I'm not really into that all that often. That's not my thing. But I did read the Black Company because it was a TOR Essential, and I loved it. Yeah, there's a little bit about all of that stuff, but also the very interesting takes on deities and an interesting magic system. Really like The Black Company by Glenn Cook. And that's it. Thanks for watching me talk about my thoughts on Night's Wyrd by Debra Doyle and James Macdonald. This has been week 12 of Justin's 52 Books, and I was talking about Prompt 12, High Fantasy. For more information on the prompts of the 52 Book Club, you can check them out on the website, the52bookclub.com. You can also check the book club out on Goodreads and Facebook and Instagram. You can also check me out on Goodreads and Storygraph and Instagram at Justin's 52 Books. And I hope to see you next week for Prompt 13, a book that was published posthumously. And we're really hitting a hallmark of science fiction written by women, and I can't wait to discuss it. Until then, happy reading.